Israel has vowed to use enormous force against Hamas and cut it off from food, fuel and other essential supplies in retaliation for the bloodiest attack on the country in decades. For its part, Hamas issued a chilling threat that it will execute a hostage every time Israel targets civilians in Gaza without warning. Some Palestinian fighters remain holed up in several locations, but the Israeli military says it's largely regained control in its southern towns after the surprise multi-pronged assault. Israel puts the death toll from the attacks at approximately 900. Gaza officials say almost 700 Palestinians have been killed. Thousands more have been injured on both sides. More rockets have been fired from Gaza and Israel is again responding with airstrikes on Palestinian targets into another night. Tens of thousands of people have been left homeless as buildings are levelled. Israel continues to mobilise its military. It's calling up to 300,000 reservists in a sign it could be planning a ground assault.
The atrocities committed by Hamas have not been seen since ISIS atrocities. Bound children executed along with their families. Young men and women shot in the back, executed. We have always known who Hamas is. Now the entire world knows. Hamas is ISIS, and we will defeat it. This vile enemy wanted war, and it will get war.
Footage has emerged showing the aftermath of the massacre by Hamas gunmen at the Supernova Festival in southern Israel. At least 260 bodies have been recovered from the site. Hamas and other militant groups say they're holding up to 130 captives in Gaza. The family of 85-year-old Yafa Adar is concerned for her welfare after she was seen driven off in a golf cart by militants.
I'm sure she's very scared. And I'm sure she feels very alone. And that's not a way to live when you're 85 and been taken away from your bed, from your house. That's not a way to suffer this trauma, this pain.
Israel has ordered a complete siege on Gaza, blocking off food and fuel. The United Nations says more than 123,000 people have been displaced by Israel's retaliation. Amongst what's left of his home, this resident says he'll never leave.
I'm not the only one left out on the street. There are 17 families in this area following this barbaric strike. Now they are destroying homes over the heads of its residents during their sleep, without any warning or reason, with the aim to displace and destroy and to uproot them from this land. However, we refuse to be uprooted. We have firm roots in this land.
As missiles continue to fly across the Gaza Strip, thousands of residents have been caught in the crossfire. ABC correspondent Nick Dole reports from the ground.
Israel continues to pound targets in the Gaza Strip. We've seen more warplanes taking off tonight. We've heard them above us as they fly down to Gaza, dropping enormous bombs and causing widespread destruction. Now, Israel says that this is to eliminate Hamas's ability to launch an attack like the one we saw on the weekend. It says that it's aiming for Hamas targets, but certainly a great number of civilians have been caught up in this. We've seen buildings come down with many people trapped underneath the rubble, including parents who've had to try to rescue their children from under the debris, bundle them up and take them for burial. So some quite confronting scenes coming from Gaza. Now, Hamas says that Israel has stopped its previous policy of warning civilians when it's going to bring down a building like we've seen. And it says that until Israel restarts that process, until it starts warning people again that their civilian infrastructure could be targeted, it is going to kill a hostage, an Israeli hostage that it captured over the weekend. It says it'll kill one Israeli hostage for every time civilians don't get a warning. Now, Israel is also trying to ratchet up the pressure on Gaza. There's already a blockade on Gaza, a very strict one, and strict rules about what can come in and out. But now Israel says that there will be a complete blockade of the Gaza Strip. So that includes things like electricity, fuel, food, water and medicine. Now that will have a profound impact, certainly, on the civilian population in Gaza. But Israel says it's also designed to starve Hamas of the resources it needs and put pressure on that regime. Nonetheless, we've seen today that Hamas retains the ability to strike fear into the Israeli civilian population. We were down in Ashkelon, about 12 kilometres from the Gaza border, and we just got out of the car when we saw another surprise attack from Hamas. Well, that was a huge rocket attack. We saw a massive volley of rockets come over from Gaza. Those bangs you can hear now, that's the Iron Dome, which is shooting most of them out of the sky. But they are everywhere, and this is obviously a strategy of Hamas. Every moment that Israelis here think that the threat level has gone, they launch another huge volley of rockets. We were down in Ashkelon because that's where some of the survivors of the weekend's terror attacks have been taken to get medical treatment. We went to the hospital there and we met a man named Raz Cohen. Now, he is one of the survivors of that music festival that was infiltrated by Hamas terrorists. They shot many of the festival goers. They took some of them over the border into Gaza. And Raz told us that first he and some of his friends, they hid under it, initially under a stage, and then they made for a run for it. And they hid in a riverbed where they tried to stay out of harm's way.
We go to the river because it's they can't see us there, but it's near to Gaza. It's very near to Gaza. So if someone see us there, they not murder us, they will kidnap us. And if you ask me, I prefer to die and not to kidnap to Gaza.
And Raz says he and his friend had to lie in that riverbed seeking shelter, but they could see in the distance Hamas militants shooting people, stabbing them, grabbing women and sexually assaulting them. And he says that he didn't have a weapon, so he felt he couldn't do anything to help. And he says that filled him with a sense of utter powerlessness.
Nick Dole reporting. The New South Wales Premier has condemned a pro-Palestinian protest in Sydney where flares were thrown onto the forecourt steps of the Opera House. Reporter Alison Zhao is in Sydney. Alison, take us through what happened last night.
Well, Karina, hundreds of protesters gathered in Sydney yesterday to show their support for the Palestinian cause and also to express their anger over the state government's decision to light up the sails of the Sydney Opera House with the colours of the Israeli flag. And they say that the government has supported the Israeli side, but not the Palestinians who are suffering in Gaza as well. So they said that this was unfair and they were angered and upset by this decision. Hundreds of people gathered at Town Hall around 5:30 p.m, despite the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese earlier pleading with those people not to go to the rally and saying that the rally shouldn't go ahead. And at Town Hall, one man was arrested by police for unfurling the Israeli flag. Police said this was a breach of the peace, but they arrested him and released him without charge. The protesters then marched on to Sydney Opera House. They were waving flags and chanting phrases like "Free Gaza," "Free Palestine," and "Shame Israel." But as the night went on, there were also chants which ended up targeting the Jewish community and included anti-Semitic language. And at the steps of the Opera House, there was a huge police presence. A wall of police officers lined the steps of the forecourt. But despite this, protesters threw flares over the top of those police officers onto the steps of the forecourt. There was also at least one set of fireworks that was set off as well. And earlier that day, the Jewish Board of Deputies had told the Jewish community not to go to the Opera House precinct or around Town Hall for fear of their safety. They said that that was a message they had received from New South Wales Police. And police have said this morning that no arrests were made last night. But we did hear earlier this morning from the Australian Palestine Advocacy Network President Nasser Mashni, who says that a better show of unity from the government would have been lighting up the sails in the colours of the Palestinian flag as well. Take a listen.
What about our lives? I'm an Australian Palestinian. My father was afforded refuge in a country far more forgiving than it is today. I grew up, I've got the Palestinian dream. I look like them still, Lisa, but I sound like us. I look like them, but I sound like us. They're my kids. When I see those kids coming out of that rubble, I feel my kids are dying. What about lighting up a building for us? When our government lines up every building blue and white, what about, how are we supposed to feel? Are we not Australian?
Alison, what has the reaction been?
Well, there's been shock and dismay from political leaders across the spectrum, but we have heard from the Jewish community as well. The president of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, Alex Rivchin, who says that last night's events were extremely hurtful and damaging to the Jewish community, especially those anti-Semitic remarks that were included in the protest chants. This is what he had to say a little bit earlier.
Well, I think it's frankly disgusting to have people coming out in support of the horrific atrocities that we've seen in Israel. Over 700 people killed. There are accounts of gang rape, of children snatched from the hands of their parents. And people in our own country think that's a cause to rally and celebrate and cheer. And then we saw the scenes of violence, of burning of flags, of chanting explicitly about Jews, not just about Israel. It's really terrifying to know that we have people who hold these sentiments here in our homeland.
That was Alex Rivchin there from the Council of Australian Jewry, and he says that last night's protest meant the Jewish community couldn't come to the CBD to see the Opera House lit up in support of Israel, and that was a big disappointment for that community. But we also heard condemnation from the New South Wales Premier, Chris Minns, who says that these horrible scenes do not represent New South Wales. He says that behaviour like last night only serves to incite violence and create division. Take a listen.
That situation is obviously intolerable for the Jewish community of New South Wales. I know that discussions are taking place this morning between the government, police and the New South Wales Jewish community to ensure that those of Jewish heritage can enjoy their city, where they were born, where they're raising their family, where they're a member of the community. We cannot have a situation where members of the Jewish community feel that they can't and are being told not to participate in their city. We lit up the Opera House specifically to show solidarity with the Jewish community, and it's a great shame that they weren't able to commemorate solemnly with their community last night.
Both the state and federal opposition leaders have condemned yesterday's rally, with Peter Dutton saying that the Minister should have liaised with community leaders to make sure that the protest didn't go ahead, while Mark Speakman, the New South Wales opposition leader, says that the New South Wales Police Minister should have not allowed this rally to go ahead.
Alison Zhao reporting from Sydney. And we'll hear from New South Wales Police about that protest shortly. We'll bring that to you when it begins. After an initial surge, oil prices could continue to rise if the conflict between Israel and Hamas spreads to major oil-producing neighbour Iran. Reporter Bridget MacArthur joins me now from Melbourne. Bridget, what does this mean for motorists?
Morning, Karina. Well, some motorists will definitely be watching those petrol prices a bit more anxiously today. We did see yesterday a surge in oil prices of more than 4%, and they're already pretty high here. You can see at the station behind me, it's around 210 cents a litre, but experts are saying that really it's actually been falling recently, and that these shock surges are fairly normal, so we're not going to see an effect on petrol prices today or in the next week even, which could come as a relief to some motorists, but that could change. Some in Israel are blaming Iran for the attacks by Hamas, and we know that Iran has been a supporter in the past of Hamas. Now that could prompt the US to reinforce or crack down on some of those sanctions against Iran, and that could restrict the passage of oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz, which is a key oil trading route. Now, if that was to happen and oil prices were to rise, then we could see that flow-on effect on petrol prices. Experts say that could take maybe 7 to 10 days to actually hit petrol prices here in Australia. But analysts really are saying that longer term fallout depends on whether or not this conflict spreads.
If there is perhaps US participation, that would be seen as a very clear escalation of the issue. And markets always move to build in a risk premium ahead of the event. And then depending on how things pan out, that risk premium is either added to or subtracted from.
So could this have broader economic consequences for Australia?
If the oil prices do continue to rise and it does become an extended conflict, we could see inflationary pressures. And we know that, if that bumped up fuel prices are a key component of the consumer price index here in Australia, which is something that the Reserve Bank looks to when it's setting interest rates. So if that went up, we could see more interest rate rises. But really at the moment, analysts are saying it's too soon to be making any long-term predictions in terms of fuel prices or the CPI. So we'll just have to wait and see how it all pans out.
Bridget MacArthur with the latest there from Melbourne.